Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
I mean, $6,200 fine or even a couple grand for a lawyer at this point, puts a dent in anyone's pocket, especially somebody who's just trying their best. I'm spending every last dollar I have trying to go and train over in the U.S. and try to, make it in my sport, which obviously the Canadian government doesn't really want too much to do with. So I'm grateful to have a program in place like that where I don't feel the stress.
Hey guys, Andrew here at Rebel News headquarters. We're here with UFC featherweight TJ Laramie. Now, the last time we spoke, TJ, you were actually training in hiding because of the lockdowns. This time, we're actually speaking to you about a fine you incurred coming back from the United States, from Las Vegas, where the UFC Performance Center and Apex and everything is. Can you tell us a bit about what happened, how you were coming back to the country, and what happened to you getting a fine?
Well, obviously, I've been doing majority of my training in the United States because here in Ontario, we're still locked down. Gyms aren't open, and they haven't been open for quite a while. I was hoping to get a fight, end of the summer. It looks like it's being pushed back to September, October, so I came back for a couple weeks to, work a little bit, save a little bit of money so I can go back to the U.S. And upon arriving back in Detroit, we took a taxi over. I actually did the required PCR test within the 72 hours of going through the border, but the results weren't in on time. So they basically said, oh, your options are you can get a fine or you can go over to Detroit and spend, I think it was $200 or $250 US to get a test, and it'll be done in half hour or whatever they were saying. Basically, they were just trying to entice me to get a test, so it saved them the paperwork in my eyes, because she's like, you understand how much this fine's going to be, and I knew I had the option of fight the fines, and I had the option of taking it to court, so I just said, hey, write me the fine, it's no big deal. My girlfriend was with me too, she also got a fine, but they're taking care of it, and I feel confident that I'm not going to have to pay a dime. So save me $250 US.
Yeah, and it's really weird to me that the Canadian border doesn't have quick tests. They don't have the best tests available. They actually want you to go and pay for another one, and then, or at the same time, pay thousands of dollars for a hotel quarantine or something to that regard. Now, there are other exemptions for other athletes. We see it all the time with the NHL. They're allowed to cross the border for the Stanley Cup playoffs. NBA players, of course. Why do you think there is no exemption for UFC fighters? You guys are professional athletes. You compete mainly in the United States if you don't want to travel around, and you're also in the toughest drug testing program in the world, USADA, which keeps you guys in tip-top shape. You're not allowed any foreign agents in your body. Why are there no exemptions for professional fighters?
Actually, if you talk to, I called the government about this because in Ontario, the outlines specify that high-level athletes, that's all they say. It doesn't really specify sport or league or anything of that sort. So I went and called who's exempted for training, and actually UFC fighters aren't even exempted, So you got sports like if you were an Olympic tennis player, you're an Olympic soccer player, anything of that sort, or even there's ping pong in the Olympics, you know what I mean? If you're a ping pong player, you're exempted to train. So really there's been really no respect as far as the Canadian government for us, and I have a visa that allows me to cross to the US and work, so it kind of doesn't really make sense. I should be able to, because typically I do cross the border when COVID's not happening to train quite often, like just a day trip over to Detroit and Michigan or even Ohio, but that's not possible now because every time I come back I'm gonna have to sit at the border for an hour as they write my ticket and then just deal with all that.
Was there any discussion at the border with the guards there about an exemption, or as to why you're not being allowed to train under an exemption or even a work exemption?
Yeah. So the actual border, the CBSA agents were extremely amazing. They helped us a ton, and they were trying their best to get a pass without writing a ticket, because at the time there was heavy flooding in Detroit and it was impossible to get around at the time. It took us almost double or triple the amount of time it should get from the Detroit airport to the Windsor tunnel. And So they tried their absolute best, but it was the health agent that said, oh, we have to write you the ticket. We have to send you back. So, I mean, realistically, they were willing to send us back into what was a state of emergency and floods to go get us test versus taxi driving me straight to my home where I was going to quarantine for 14 days, whether I had COVID or not, based on whatever this test was going to say, right? Like, it's not like I was going to have to quarantine any less, whether it was a negative test, right, or a positive test. It's the same amount of time. So nothing changes for that initial test, and they still try to test you 2 times after. And they never came up and checked on us. They never called me, once I did get into the quarantine. So it really shows how serious they are about this. They're serious they're serious when they want to get money from you. That's about it.
All right, so you called us, you filled out the forms at fightthefines.com. You and your girlfriend, you're not going to have to pay that. We're going to provide you with lawyers for the fines to fight them in court. We've won them all over the world, West Coast, East Coast of Canada, Australia. How does that make you feel knowing that you don't have to pay? I know people are going to think he's a UFC fighter, but you're not getting the Monster Energy logo on your jersey right now. How does it make you feel that you don't have to pay that?
I mean, $6,200 fine or even a couple grand for a lawyer at this point, puts a dent in anyone's pocket, especially somebody who's just trying their best. I'm spending every last dollar I have trying to go and train over in the U.S. and try to, make it in my sport, which obviously the Canadian government doesn't really want too much to do with. So I'm grateful to have a program in place like that where I don't feel the stress of financial.
Yeah, even though Ontario has its own MMA approval board that we hold events here, or we used to before the lockdowns happened, there's still no consideration for professional fighters, even though there's a lot of them in this province. So we're going to talk to the lawyers about TJ's case, and we'll get back to you soon about this, guys. We're back in the studio to welcome Jenna Little, paralegal for FightTheFines.com. Thanks for joining us once again, Jenna. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing so well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. No one ever asks around here. No, I'm just kidding. TJ Laramie was fined $6,200 along with his girlfriend, charged the same amount coming across the border. Now, we've seen multiple increases for the dollar amount of fines under the Quarantine Act, haven't we? Why have we been seeing that?
Well, we've actually only seen one increase. The original amount of the fine was $3,000 plus surcharge, and then about a month ago they increased it to $5,000 plus surcharge, and surcharge is 25% of the overall fine, so it bumps it up to a good $6,250.
Now, there's exemptions for some professional athletes. We know, of course, the hockey players were going back and forth for the finals, NBA players, but not all athletes are getting the benefit of an exemption. Is the law clear, and does it specify what sports are to receive them, Jenna?
It actually isn't clear, and it doesn't specify. It basically says you have to be affiliated with a national organization. This organization and your participation in the single sport event has to be authorized by the Deputy of Heritage. And there's some letters and stuff that you can get to qualify for that. But the law is pretty broad. It includes amateur and semi-professional as well as full professional sports, as long as they fall into those categories.
Now, it's a pretty professional sport. I don't know why he's not being allowed to go back and forth, especially considering, as he mentions in the video, that he's got a work visa for the United States. He has a company there. Should that play into it at all, or did they completely eliminate work for travel for work, should I say?
They allow travel for work, but those restrictions are based more on how frequently you're going across the border. They consider a frequent travel to be somebody who's going back and forth several times throughout the month. In this situation, I think the best angle to take would be that he's a pro athlete. He's taking part in a single sporting event, and it is a nationally recognized association.
For sure. And have any of these quarantine acts been taken to trial? I know TJ mentioned that he's heard of a lot of them being thrown out. We've heard lots of other things. How likely is it that we will be successful in fighting these Quarantine Act fines, do you think?
It's hard to say, to be honest, because they haven't gone to court yet. Even when all of this started in January, I have some files from that time, and even they haven't gotten court dates yet. The majority of these court dates go to the Mississauga court, and the Mississauga court is a very, very busy court. So they're dealing with backlogs from before the pandemic, never mind everything that's happening during the pandemic. So in terms of getting an actual trial date, I have no idea when that's going to happen. They're not even setting virtual dates at this point, from what I know. We're looking at least a year, I would think, in delays. And in terms of how things are going to get thrown out, we don't know yet, but I'm going to use everything I can.
Last question, Jenna, then I'll let you go. If we're waiting up for a year for these quarantine fines and regular fines from, protesting and other wild things like that, how long do you think everything else is going to take in total? How far behind are the court systems and the judicial system going to be behind? Are they prioritizing COVID-related things, or are they prioritizing, maybe there's a bank robbery or something? I don't know. How long can we expect to be behind for?
Well, in the provincial courts, they're prioritizing the matters that were started or were commenced prior to the COVID shutdown. So all of the people with traffic tickets, et cetera, that were given tickets and either had live cases before the court shut down or were just waiting for a court date, they'll be getting their dates first. They're not prioritizing in terms of content or what statute someone's been charged under. This is the provincial court we're talking about, not the criminal court. The criminal court has been functioning per normal this entire time, pretty much, just virtually. But the provincial court just hasn't caught up yet, unfortunately. They're getting there, though.
Well, we hope that we can start to see some of these. We've had a lot of battles so far around the world and even around the country. So thanks a lot for your insight, Jenna. I don't know what we'd do without you. Thanks to TJ Laramie. If you guys want to contribute to our legal fund to help fight against these fines and help pay for the lawyers, we are winning fights. Like I said, West Coast, East Coast, Australia. Please go to fightthefines.com right now and consider donating. Thanks for watching another Fight the Fines. Please don't forget to go to fightthefines.com where you can donate and get a registered charity receipt from the Democracy Fund. This is how we pay for lawyers and legal fees in our fight to get our freedoms back.